reviews, interviews, and recommendations. If you're wondering why I'm quiet, it's because I'm reviewing A Quiet Place Part 2, which is the sequel to the 2018 hit Quiet Place. It comes to theaters on May 28, 2021 after taking a long hiatus due to the pandemic. And I'm going to tell you 3 things I liked about it and 3 things that I didn't love about it. Okay, I think it's okay to be louder. So this is, again, if you didn't hear, I'm sorry, I just wanted to set some ambiance. This is a review of A Quiet Place Part 2, which is a sequel to the 2018 film A Quiet Place. I'm going to go into 3 things I really liked about this film, 3 things I didn't really love about this film, and just a warning, this will have spoilers. I'll try to, give you a hint when the big spoilers come, but this review will have spoilers. If you want a spoiler-free review, check out watcherpass.com. It's where I post my written reviews. They're spoiler-free. They're a little more vague, so you can kind of get a sense of the film and things I like. And then like this, the video review, I go into spoilers, so just be warned. A Quiet Place Part 2, the basic setup is, so in A Quiet Place, there were these monsters that you find out were attracted by sound. They couldn't see, but they had amazing hearing. So A Quiet Place was this really interesting film that created this horror world where you couldn't say anything. And it was pretty amazing because you had these scenes with terrible things going on and people having to stay quiet. And you had these situations where people were fighting for their lives or running for their lives in such a silent manner. It was such an interesting kind of idea to have a film where sound was a big weapon, or a big sound was a dangerous thing. So in A Quiet Place Part 2, we have the same family, the Abbott family, and so at the end of A Quiet Place Part 1, the Abbott family's wonderful farm. It was this kind of idyllic farm where they had built all this, survival infrastructure. They had electricity, they had food, they had warning systems and places to go if something went wrong. That farm got a little destroyed, and the father in the family, Lee, who was played by John Krasinski, he was killed, and so the film kind of ended with the sounds of more creatures coming to the farm. So in A Quiet Place Part 2, the family now has to leave, presumably I guess to get supplies or to avoid this threat, and they have to go find help. And so the Abbott family picks up and leaves and goes to find help, and lo and behold, they find some help, but they also find some things that are not so helpful. They find more creatures. They find some people that have maybe less than perfect intentions. And so they have to survive again, except this time without Lee. A Quiet Place Part 2 continues the story. It continues directly after the first film. And you get to spend some more time with the family. So here are 3 things I really liked about A Quiet Place Part 2. The first is the sound. I mean, as you would expect from A Quiet Place Part 2, it has fantastic sound. The first film was this auditory kind of revelation because you had really good positional audio and this really interesting idea where people couldn't make sound. So you had activities that were much more muffled than you would expect to see them in any movie. Quiet Place Part 2 continues this. It has really, really fantastic positional audio. You're going to hear things behind you. You're going to hear things above you. If you have a good setup, it's a really wonderful, auditory experience. I just love the aspect of this film where you have people who are trying to survive and can't make any sound. You've got characters that need to survive, and so they have to stay quiet. And the things that they do to survive and stay quiet in this world, you've got some characters who speak sign language. You've got some characters who muffle, their buildings or muffle their equipment. So if you like this kind of quiet horror that Quiet Place Part 1 was, you're going to love A Quiet Place Part 2 sound. The second thing I loved about A Quiet Place Part 2 is the world building. A Quiet Place Part 2, the world feels very real. You've got buildings that are worn down. The idea is that when these creatures came and started killing people, everyone had to kind of retreat from society, and the world kind of started to wear and fall apart. You've got these buildings that feel like they're slowly
disintegrating around people. You've got broken windows, you've got fraying paint, and you've got some very creative ways to live in this new normal that everyone's in. So in A Quiet Place, the farm had sand to muffle the sound. They had warning lights. They had special places that you could go to be quiet. A Quiet Place Part Two also has that. So you've got some characters have special compartments that they can go to where they know that the creatures can't get to them, or they have special parts in their house where the sound is much more muffled. It feels like a very creative lived-in world, and it feels like a lot of aspects about this world are thought out to allow these characters to live in it. It's a really nice feature when you have an environment that feels like a realistic type of situation. Well, it's not realistic, but it feels like an authentic situation. And the other thing, it has a lot of really small touches that I liked, that makes it feel like a lived-in world. So at the start, you go to the very beginning of the I keep wanting to call it the pandemic. Sorry, that's what we've been living through. You go to the very start of this creature, apocalypse. And John Krasinski's character is walking through town, and he passes this pizzeria that is, I forget the name of the pizzeria, but it's like a pizzeria and deli. And he gets to his son's little league game, which is where he's going, and his son's team is sponsored by that pizzeria and deli. And it's a nice little touch, but it's those little things that kind of make this feel like an authentic world. So the world of A Quiet Place feels real. It feels very lived in, and that's the second thing I love. The third thing is the characters, and mainly the strong female leads. Like all the characters are interesting, and they're complex in this movie, but the female leads are really just a treat to watch. You've got Evelyn, who's played by Emily Blunt. She's the mother. She was strong in the first film, but she had her husband Lee, who was played by John Krasinski, to help out with some of the defense, to help out with some aspects of the farm and the life. And in this film, because he's gone, she has to be the one that kind of moves the family along, protects the family, gets them supplies, and it's really kind of she's a very capable character, and I really liked seeing her kind of take the lead and make sure that everyone stays healthy and quiet, and also just trying to be the head of this family. And then we also have Reagan, who is played by Millicent Simmonds. And she is just fun because she is so headstrong and creative. Like, she's the character that figured out that her hearing aid can harm the creatures and disorient them long enough to get some sort of killing blow on them. And in this film, she's trying to share that information with the world, and so she has to strike out on her own, against her parents' wishes, or her parents' wishes. And so she is just really fun to kind of see because she's hopeful, she's creative, and she's very headstrong. And it's really nice to have two strong female leads that are able to survive in this very harsh world, and kind of see their creativity and their capabilities on screen. So those are the three things I liked. And I'm going to preface this by I did really like this movie. I thought A Quiet Place Part Two was a very well done movie. It continued the story of A Quiet Place. You have the same characters, you've got the same family, you have a lot of the really cool aspects that made A Quiet Place, the first film, so special. So I'm going to go into the three things I didn't like. Overall, I thought this was a good film. It's definitely a treat to see in theaters. As I mentioned, the sound is really, really good. So if you see it in theaters and you see it with a really good sound setup, it is going to be something to experience. But that being said, there are a few things I didn't love about this movie. The first is the story. It feels the A Quiet Place Part Two feels more disjointed because of kind of how they set the film up. A Quiet Place Part One, you had this kind of nice linear progression of building the world with a few flashbacks to kind of show you what happened in the past, but you kind of have this general like building the world, building out this farm, and kind of how this family has come up with these solutions to survive. And then you have the conflict where a creature comes for them, and they have to take it out, and they figure out how to finally kill one of these creatures. A Quiet Place Part Two starts off leaving the farm, And then you get to this steel mill where one of the characters gets hurt, and so they kind of have to split up for various reasons. And so you have essentially three parallel storylines going at once. You've got Emily Blunt's character going to get supplies. You've got the son and the baby at the steel mill trying to survive and kind of, stay quiet and stay, stay out of the notice of the creatures. And then you have Reagan and Emmett. Emmett is a new character that we meet. He was a friend of the Abbott family, in the past, and now he's kind of more of a survivalist. He's a little bit more disillusioned with humanity because he's had to kind of survive on his own for so long. But so Reagan and Emmett go to try to share the secret with the world, the secret that you can disorient the creatures with some feedback from a microphone. And so they all go off and on their own little adventure. And so you have three different parallel storylines all happening at the same time. And it makes the film feel a little disjointed. They do some cool things to try to relate them. You'll have some times where two of the storyline, parts of the storyline will line up. So you'll have maybe a fire in one and a fire in another, and they'll kind of merge those two together into one kind of overall scene. Or you'll have a creature that attacks one of the sets of characters, and you'll have a creature that attacks another set of characters, and they'll kind of have events from that line up. So you do get these cool kind of parallels, but overall it makes the film a little tough to follow because you've got these three different storylines that they kind of cut through at different times. So sometimes you're not 100% sure where you are, although you figure that out pretty quickly. And it just makes the film feel not as connected and not as kind of easy to follow as the first film. And also, the motivations of some of the characters and situations are less clear than they were in the first film. Now, the first film, it took place on the farm. It was easier to kind of understand what was happening. This film, it starts with them leaving the farm, and I had to be reminded what happened at the end of A Quiet Place, where the creature sounds were around them. When I saw this film, I didn't really understand why they were leaving the farm. I still don't really know why. I mean, the farm, even though it's a little bit destroyed, it still seems to have a lot of things that they would need. It's got food, you can see preserved food. It's got electricity, which is always important. And most importantly, it has their baby supplies, and they have a brand new baby. And it's very creative what they do to try to keep the baby quiet. But I mean, they basically just have a box with some oxygen and that's it. And I mean, maybe the Abbott family is just a much more efficient traveling system than I am, but they basically leave with the shirts on their back, a backpack, and the baby. And I remember my first trip with my child, I had two rolling suitcases of stuff, of toys and supplies and things like that. I think I had a backpack holder that had the car seat on it. And I had my own backpack on the front of me. And then we had a stroller with the baby, and I looked like just a pack mule. And babies take a lot of stuff, and they also aren't great to travel. And so it's really interesting to see kind of the things that the family does to kind of keep the baby quiet. But it just doesn't, I didn't really understand why they left. I guess they were trying to go get help and get some supplies, but it didn't really gel why they were leaving this wonderful farm situation. I think, the idea was that they had to leave because creatures were coming, and also they wanted to, share the information of how to defeat them with people, but that just wasn't very clear at the start. And then some of the things that happen in the film, the characters make some pretty bad decisions for seemingly no reason. I mean, in one scene, a character will go explore when they don't really have to. And then obviously something will go wrong and they'll make noise, and all of a sudden you've got this creature coming. And to be fair, it leads to these very exciting, tense scenes, which I guess is kind of the main point of a horror film like A Quiet Place Part 2. But it also leads to kind of me wondering, why are you doing this? Why? And, I guess horror films, characters tend to make bad decisions because you set up these scenes. But I didn't, the A Quiet Place Part 2, the family seems much more capable than I think most horror protagonists can be. And so when they make these bad decisions, it just feels off. You also have this kind of Last of Us type of vibe where you've got, characters in the film that I guess are supposed to be bad guys. Emmett's character is very worried about the people that are left and how terrible they are. And you get a sense of that when you finally meet them, but it's a very brief meeting, and it feels like kind of a missed opportunity. I don't know, maybe the film had, more scenes with, what the people outside are like and how kind of the society has devolved. But it felt like they made a big deal about how terrible, people outside of the farm and outside of the general community were, and then you just didn't really see them. You saw them briefly, and then that was it. I felt like there could be more, you know, either cut those people, or, have more scenes where you experience what the outside world did. Like you could have some scenes where people, you see some people who were shot or killed or something, just something to kind of give you some more fear, because the whole, roving bands of evil people just didn't really sink in because it was such a short experience, and then they were gone, and then you never saw them again. So the story just, it wasn't as coherent and as well thought out, I think, as the first film. And so, just keep that in mind when you go see this. The second thing I didn't love are the creatures. A Quiet Place had such a great sense of tension because you never saw the creatures. You heard them, and you heard, like, you heard the results of them. You'd hear like a screech, or you'd hear a whoosh as one ran by, or like, as one took out an animal or a person. But you didn't see them much. You got glimpses of pictures until the very end, where, then you really kind of get a sense of the creatures, and it made it okay, because you've got this really wonderful buildup, and then you finally get the reveal. But sometimes when you reveal the creatures, and this is not unique to A Quiet Place, this is kind of a typical issue with some horror. When you reveal the creature, it's much less scary than having, the fear of the creature and the fear of the unknown. And in A Quiet Place Part 2, we've already seen the creatures, so they're much more prevalent. You see them, there are multiple encounters with them. You see them in the world, and when you see them more often, you get a sense that they are very CG. Now, to be fair, the effects are very good in The Quiet Place Part 2, but the creatures, they just look CG. They're kind of disproportionate. They move strangely. They're like super strong, but also very wiry, and they also look computer generated. They look very good computer generated, but they look like they're computer generated, and it makes them not be as, um, you know as actually scary. I mean, the things that they do are terrible. Like they can kill people with a swipe. They destroy concrete and steel and things like that. But it makes them not as scary as I think they were in A Quiet Place Part 1, where you didn't really see them. And you also, um, it's tough to kind of really, because you see them more often in this film, they look like giant killing machines, and I didn't really understand why. And maybe that's my problem. Maybe I'm trying to understand why for these creatures that just have no motivation. But basically, they'll just go in and they'll just murder everything, and they don't eat, the things that they murder. They don't, use them. They just basically kill, 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 and leave. And I didn't really understand what their purpose was. Like, what are the creatures hoping to do? Do they just want like a quiet world where there's no sound? That's why they're killing everything with sound, because they are really loud when they move. Like, they are very, very loud. So it just made them not as scary as in the first film. And that's probably just kind of what happens when you have a creature that's revealed early on. You kind of see them more often. But overall, the creatures were just a little more disappointing because we're used to them, because they looked so computer generated. The last thing I didn't love about this film is the ending. The Quiet Place Part 1 ended with kind of a cliffhanger. You had a resolution, but then you heard the creatures coming. And A Quiet Place Part 2 is similar. You have a resolution that just ends abruptly, and it felt like a film that kind of should have had maybe another 5 or 10 minutes to kind of tie up the story. And I think the reason that it ended abruptly is because there will probably be A Quiet Place Part 3. I assume A Quiet Place Part 2 will do very well. A Quiet Place Part 1 did very well, leading to the sequel, and I assume the sequel will do quite well and will lead to a third. But the abrupt ending makes it not as doesn't it makes it not as fulfilling of a work on its own. It kind of feels like it's just a linking piece to the next, finale, presumably when they fight the creatures. I mean, at the end of A Quiet Place Part 2, You have Emily Blunt's character and her son in the steel mill. They've survived the creature, but the mill is basically destroyed around them. And you also have Reagan and Emmett finally broadcasting the feedback from the hearing aid, and so everyone can now use this. And so they use this to take out their creature. They stand tall, and then boom, it's over. The film's done. There's no after credit scenes. There's nothing after that, and it just feels like now you've got the family in two parts, and eventually they're probably going to reunite, but it just didn't. They didn't get to that point, and it would have been nice to have like a little scene after where they maybe are shown walking back to the steel mill, or maybe even walking back to the farm. Like I don't know what they would have done, but having an abrupt ending that clearly kind of pushes us to the next film, it made it unfulfilling. And I would have liked to have something that ties up, that maybe hints at a sequel, but not overtly shows that there's going to be a sequel. So like I said, I liked this film. It's a good film. I like the characters. John Krasinski is a very talented filmmaker, and the film has all the things that you really love about the first film. It has this really lived-in world. It's got this great sound. It's got this wonderful sense of tension, and this really interesting idea where you have horrible things around you happening, and you can't say anything, and you sometimes can't hear what's going on. And so I think if you watch this film, watch it with a really good setup, with a really kind of nice theater system and a really good surround sound setup, because that is where this film shines the most. I think if you watch it, you'll like it. But those are my criticisms. The things I liked, the things I didn't like. There's plenty more to talk about this film. So please let me know what you thought about the review, and if you see it, let me know what you think about the film in the comments. And if you've got a second, like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me out a lot and makes sure all my new content goes straight to you. But thanks for watching, and enjoy.